Sticking with the whole playoff scenarios conversation, how about Oregon? A lot of us remember what happened in Atlanta, and we said, oh boy, it's going to take a while for Dan Lanning and company, won't it? It's going to be a little bit before they eventually get to playoff caliber. Well, the playoff rankings came and went, and they're number 8 in the country, folks. And since we saw them in Atlanta, they have looked like a completely different football team. Because think about all the newness that was in that game. New head coach, new quarterback, trying to get their feet wet at what we call a neutral site, which really, let's call a spade a spade. That was a home game with some air conditioning and a roof for Georgia. Since it was played in Atlanta, like, odds weren't necessarily stacked in their favor to have your first game of the Dan Lanning era. So, what is the path for them? Because I really believe a path exists. The ESPN playoff predictor has them at a 50% chance to make the playoff if they do win out and win the conference championship. All right? So 2 crucial things obviously have to happen. If you're a 2-loss Pac-12 champion, you're not making the playoff. No 2-loss team has ever made the playoff, so we'll leave it at that. What's the gauntlet for them the rest of the way, though? What's the schedule? You got to go to Colorado, play Washington, which, with Michael Penix's company, never an easy win. That'll be a fun rivalry game. Excited to watch that. Then you welcome Utah to Autzen Stadium. 14th-ranked Utah, by the way, right now. That will tell us a lot about the Ducks, in my humble opinion. I'm very excited for that game. I think that is, for my money, the most losable, quote-unquote, game for them. And then you play Oregon State at Oregon State. Right now, Oregon State is ranked. I believe they're the 23rd ranked team in the country. Sounds weird to say, but if you're an Oregon fan, you are rooting hard for Utah. You are rooting hard for Oregon State. Heck, you're rooting hard for USC. I know, Duck fans, it sounds a little bit weird. I know that they are the absolute bane of your existence, but you're rooting for all of them until you play them. Why? Because it boosts your resume. Like we talked about in the early going. The resume, unfortunately, is how this thing gets sorted out. All right? The way of the world. So, the Utah game, according to ESPN's playoff predictor, they have a 54% chance to win that game. Will they be favored? I don't know, but that's what they're saying. So that's the one game, like I said, we're really watching closely. But here's the recipe. Everyone wants to talk about scenarios and ingredients that go into this whole playoff thing. Here's the recipe for me that give Oregon the best chance to win, to get to the college football playoff. You need a 2-loss Michigan or Ohio State. So Michigan still has to play Illinois, which for right now is a ranked matchup. Illinois playing really good football, Bielema ball. You never know what's going to happen there. They have to play that game. Ohio State, I believe, goes to Maryland. That's probably their biggest test. Now, why are we talking about these games? Because somebody's got to lose when they play in Columbus, right? Like Ohio State has to lose or Michigan has to lose. If they show up undefeated, you don't want to get into Michigan's resume versus Oregon's resume or Ohio State's resume versus Oregon's resume. You want to just kind of have that off the table to begin with. A 2-loss team doesn't make it in. You would like for one of these programs to have a loss before they get to playing each other. Because, again, guarantees one of them having 2 losses. That's the first thing. Second thing you would like the SEC champion to be from the East. So whether it's Georgia, whether it's Tennessee, you want one of them to run the table, go undefeated, be the number 1 seed. Well, why is that? Because then it avoids the scenario where you have 2 SEC teams potentially being in. Doesn't lock it up for sure, but it avoids that scenario. Because you would have a 2-loss Alabama. And a 2-loss team is not getting in the playoff. History is our teacher. Until our teacher tells us something different, that's the method I'm going with. This is something you would also want. All right, here's 2 wants for you. You would like Clemson to have 1 loss, and you'd like TCU to have 1 loss. Those are 2 really interesting ingredients when it comes to the college football playoff because right now they're both undefeated. If they both go undefeated, they're not getting left out. I'm telling you, whether it's 1-loss Tennessee, whether it's 1-loss Michigan, whoever it is, if those programs are undefeated and are conference champions, they will have a spot at the table. I promise you. So that would help, right? Both of those losing would help. You'd like to avoid the scenario where you have to have your resume compared with a 1-loss Tennessee. Some things probably have to happen for that to be the reality. The things I just mentioned actually have to happen for that to be a reality. But that's a scenario you'd want to avoid because you share a common opponent, assuming that 1 loss for Tennessee is to Georgia. Again, that's the assumption. If you get into a comparison with that, you don't like what you bring to the table. Because in your first game, whether it's right or wrong, that's the data we have to go off of. That's the common data point. And I know they played them in week 10. You played them in week 1. It's the way it goes. You have a 49-3 loss. And unless Tennessee loses by more than 46, that would lean towards Tennessee, and they would get the in. This is something we don't talk about enough. Style points help. If you blow out a top-ranked USC, if you blow out a ranked Utah, you blow out a ranked Oregon State team, I say top-ranked USC as in a top 10 ranked USC, that helps your case. Like, you are, at this point in time, chasing some of that goodwill that you lost from the committee from the first week of the season. Because that 46-point loss to Georgia is something that you're continuing to try and erase and trying to prove, hey, no, that was week one. We're a new football team. So when it comes down to comparing resumes, you have these strong margins of victory that could eventually play in your favor. So to recap, 2 lost Michigan or Ohio State. You don't want to have two Big Ten teams having a chance to be in the dance. You need the winner to be from the SEC East for the SEC. You don't want a 1-loss Bama and then 1-loss Georgia, maybe 1-loss Tennessee. You don't want to have that kind of conversation happening, all right? You would like both a 1-loss Clemson and a 1-loss TCU to be reality for you, and you feel like, okay, at that point, it's a conversation. That's all we're trying to do. There's no specific formula. You have the predictor percentage. I get that. That's cool. At the end of the day, people make this decision. So throw computers out of it like we already have. Just want to get to having a conversation. And when you have that conversation, have as much style points as possible to help yourself when that conversation arrives. Oh, yeah, Oregon? You mean the team that just beat USC by 3 touchdowns? Yeah, USC was a top 10 team. Pretty impressive by Oregon, right? That's the kind of conversation you would like to be able to have when it comes to Selection Sunday. So is there a path? 100%. There absolutely is a path that exists. Is it likely? ESPN has you at a 50% chance. Take that as you will. However narrow it is, the path exists for Oregon. Let's play some ball. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.